Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, June 7th, 2017. We are about 14 seconds behind schedule, as it turns out. I hit the buttons a little bit late, but I think we're going to be okay. If we can just catch up here. I'll have to talk really fast for the next couple of seconds, and then we'll move up on the 14 seconds that we lost in the beginning of the show. How's that? Did that help? Did we make up any time? Oh, look at that. Oh, I got the wrong... Nothing like hitting the wrong buttons to start the day. However, at least we got a dramatic start to things. Plus, of course, the close of the show, which is fantastic because I get to end early. I have the if you have two keyboards in front of you, it's a serious danger, especially if one of them will play sounds. I needed to open up TweetDeck on a second computer in order to be able to track your comments as things go on. And as I began to open that up, let's see, I hit the T. The T is will trigger the horror dramatic sound effect on our soundboard, and a W is our closing. So I didn't even get up to E on that one. Okay, well, sorry about that. Sorry about the confusion. Let's catch up with what's in the news. New FBI director being nominated, or at least the announcement made by, did Trump do it? Was the Trump administration? I missed the whole announcement. I woke up, got everything ready. I saw a couple of tweets in the morning. I think it happened during the time in which I'm generally preparing lunches for the kids, the very important job of preparing their lunches for the day. There's only a couple days of school left, and I saw there were a number of messages on in the background chat on Skype, and that's how I learned that we have a nominee for FBI director. First order of business today is to have Armando speak substantively about the nominee. He's unable to. That was the first note I got. He's not going to be doing that. So, okay, we can move past that. We have a busy day as it is. Greg Dworkin will be back and joining us, and he will no doubt be able to update us on that situation. Already people tweeting about it, already pointing to stories about it. Empty Wheel has already published on the guy, and so we've got some background information. Not that it's going to matter very much at this point who's leading the FBI. It's going to be done poorly because the person will have been nominated by Donald Trump and have accepted the job. One of the things we didn't get to yesterday, but which you no doubt saw discussed and written up on the front pages of Daily Kos, include the fact that I think 4 top law firms, all approached by Donald Trump about representing him in the ongoing probes, have rejected him as a client, which is a really amazing thing. There's not that many opportunities as a top law firm to be asked to come to the personal defense of the President of the United States. Usually a good gig. However, nobody wanted this one, not only likely because, well, I don't know why they said they didn't want it. They said they would need to spend more time with their families. Other good reasons include he's a liar and he's guilty of all these things, and that sucks because you're going to lose your case. Although it's really hard to lose cases like this one, but there's a real serious chance that you might, and I think that's at the heart of most of the rejections. One of the off-the-record, or not off-the-record, but anonymous quotes, I guess, from one of the firms. I don't know whether this came up in the internal debate about whether or not to take him as a client or not, but if it didn't, it should have. Somebody at one of the firms just said, why would we take a client like this? He's not going to pay, first of all. That's the best reason. And 2, he doesn't listen. He's not going to listen to what we say. We're going to bang our heads against the wall and lose as a result of his big, fat blabber mouth. And 3, we're not going to get paid for our trouble. So, well, good eye is all I can say. Anyway, he probably likely went through the same thing with FBI directors, but he landed on somebody who I guess was willing to put up with all of the headache and reputational damage in exchange for being FBI director for at least a little while. I mean, it's a 10-year term. It's not a bad gig if you just say, I'm just going to swallow hard and survive this. And, if I help impeach the guy, I help impeach the guy. It's a 10-year term. That's a pretty good gig. So maybe it'll work out for him. I don't know. Well, anyway, Plenty of other things to catch up on today. Well, of course, as I said, have Greg Dworkin here, Joan McCarter as well. Thanks to Bill in Portland, Maine for tweeting us off this morning. I don't know, maybe that sounds kind of gross, huh? All right, well, just getting us started, kicking us off. How about that? There's nothing odd about being kicked, right? Are you kicking us off with a morning tweet? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to involve you that intimately in our morning affairs. We're glad to have you, but we didn't get your permission first. And that's important. Always get consent, I say. Good morning, Greg. How are you doing?
Good morning. I unfortunately didn't hear any of the introduction.
That is okay. It was horrible.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know. Hey, it's a day that ends in Y, so there's like a ton of news.
Why?
Because every day that ends in Y has a ton of news.
Why? Okay.
Because
we like you.
Yeah, MOUS.
Right.
The thing is that Trump manages to make news in ways that not necessarily are good to him, that redounds well to his legacy, shall we say, but nonetheless he does it. Today's Pundit Roundup, for example. Let's start with that.
All right, excellent choice.
We entitled it Winning Hearts and Minds International Edition.
Do we ever... You don't have
because
to
there's so many things going on.
Yeah, you usually don't have to worry about the hearts and minds of Americans.
Well,
I mean, votes, yes, but...
We do have here from the Daily Beast, and it seems like years old because it's only 24 hours old.
Yes.
In one email exchange, a State Department official feels the need to explain that lowering punitive sanctions on the Russian oil industry would be rewarding Moscow without getting anything from the Kremlin in return. Note for this article, they understand that Moscow is a good reference to the Russians.
Yes.
Okay, which probably is more than you could say for the House of Representatives. Paul Ryan had a very strongly worded letter about violence by Turkish goons, which he referred to Istanbul. Not Ankara, the capital, but Istanbul.
Were they from Istanbul?
Hard to know. But if you're going to send a message, you don't send it to Istanbul.
Or Constantinople.
If you are mad and you're European, you don't send a message to New York. You send a message to Washington.
Yes.
It's kind of, everybody kind of knows that, right?
Yeah.
So, somebody suggested to me maybe what we need to do is send Trump a world map with some of the capitals, circled in crayon. So that, you can kind of get an idea of what's going on. Ladbrokes Politics, operating out of England, has latest re-election odds. 70% Sadiq Khan, mayor of London.
That is the capital.
28% Donald Trump.
Oh.
Okay. Nate Silver had a good post. Trump's foreign trip now looks like an unmitigated disaster.
Now.
He's really talking about the gutter controversy here. It does seem, at least CNN announced last night, that the Russians planted a fake news story, which suggested that the emir had said not nice things about Trump and nice things about Iran, and it turned out it was a fake story.
Yes.
And Trump didn't care because he went with the idea that he was going to punish Qatar and side with Saudi Arabia on making a bigger split in our Mideast allies, because the whole purpose of the trip was unite everybody.
Yes.
But it turns out Qatar has Al Jazeera, and so that's not fond territory for the Saudis.
Yes, they're very critical sometimes of the Saudis. I did see Marcy Wheeler indicating that she had very little reason to believe that the Russians were behind that hacking, but I'm not certain.
From a logical point of view, Marcy was saying, what do they get out of it? Because the Iranians are a Russian ally. And Qatar's actually semi-aligned with Iran because they share a big oil field, a really big oil field.
Do they? Is that what is it?
Yeah.
Is it middle of the Gulf?
They co-manage it.
Oh. Well, good for you, Qatar. Well done. But apparently a big problem. Okay. Well, it is a burgeoning disaster, and hopefully none of the royal families that run almost all of the actors involved, to the exclusion of the popular will in almost all of the countries, but who have all been armed to the teeth by us, will, go crazy or anything. Hope there's no war.
Well,
like there is already.
I hope there's no war. So the things that Nate Silver cited in pointing out how big a disaster it was, he pointed to 3 articles. One from Susan Glasser in Politico, the 27 words Trump wouldn't say. It's the exact phrase. We face many threats, but I stand here before you with a clear message. The U.S. commitment to the NATO alliance and to Article 5 is unwavering. That's the line that he took out. That's part of the disaster that happened at the European end of the trip.
A different disaster.
There's the $110 billion arms deal to Saudi Arabia, which is fake news.
I told you it was.
Right? Only the problem is there's no deal. And at the same time, he sides with the Saudis in fighting, amongst our allies, which is not a good thing.
Uh-huh.
And then the CNN exclusive, U.S. suspects Russian hackers planted fake news behind the gutter crisis. So, you have to remember just a few days, weeks ago, there was still, and again, I go back to this frequently, the U.S. press cannot stop themselves from trying to normalize Trump and write about what a successful trip, just like the mission accomplished Bush landing on the carrier. If it's there, they have to write it up in glowing terms. And some people actually did that at the beginning of the trip, although by the end of the trip, I think people knew better. But, of course, they should have known better from the beginning.
Well,
because it's Trump.
They didn't. Bob Corker got caught up in that. I mean, he was the one who said that the whole thing was near perfect. And then yesterday they read him Trump's Qatar tweets, and he was shaking his head and he had no answer. I'm sorry, I don't know what to say about something so terrible.
Right, exactly. Now, I happen to be a bit of an internationalist. I'm very fond of, Europeans. Some Europeans more than others, okay, I admit, but, there you have it. Howard Wolfson, traveling, tweets this, was just in London. Trump's attacks on Khan, meaning the mayor of
He
London.
attacks all cons, as
he
it turns
does.
out.
Were huge news and played terribly. Londoners were mystified and angry at POTUS. Real damage done.
Yes.
Meanwhile, Rex Tillerson, this is why it was the international edition, Rex Tillerson goes to New Zealand. U.S. media traveling with Tillerson were surprised by the number of people flipping the bird at Tillerson at his motorcade as it sped through town.
Yes, number was all of them.
Correspondent Gardner Harris says he's been at a lot of motorcades, but even he was taken aback by the negative reaction. Andrea Mitchell. Okay. Secretary of State Tillerson's motorcade arriving in New Zealand greeted by people signaling thumbs down and a display of middle fingers for quitting Paris.
It's amazing that they even know. I don't know where you get the news. I guess maybe it's a slow day in New Zealand. That the Secretary of State being in town is news, but who even lines the streets of a motorcade for the U.S. Secretary of State?
That's the thing. Who does? And yet they're just not very happy about it.
No.
Kind of the point there.
Gandalf was there, giving him the finger. Yeah, everybody who was on location filming.
Yeah, exactly. That would have been really odd, right? I mean, in the motorcade, and then like the whole street is lined with orcs. You
shall not pass. Yeah, it would have been fantastic. But we missed that opportunity.
That would have been pretty outstanding. But the whole idea is that this is playing badly, and I think it's just yet another different miscalculation. We'll get to this as the other part of this themed discussion today. But this is not one where you could say, well, the working class in New Zealand still support him. It doesn't work that way.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. I don't see how it would work out that way at all. Okay. Not surprising
How about this one? Trump is now pretending to sign major legislation since he still hasn't been able to pass any. So he has this little tiny desk where he sits and he signs basically a list of things. It's like a laundry list or a grocery list to himself as to what to do, and then he signs it with great fanfare with people standing around it, but it's not an actual bill, and it doesn't have any meaning.
Right. These are the only bills he likes to get, by the way.
I thought that was pretty cool.
It is amazing. What is that little desk, though? Why does he use that? I'm surprised he doesn't use his...
I think Steve Bannon has the big desk.
Maybe that's it.
And he doesn't let, President Bannon doesn't let Trump
It makes his hands look bigger.
Maybe it does.
That's it. So he's signing all sorts of garbage. I think he should start signing his tweets just so he has a couple more things each day.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's the international stuff that we had. At the moment, he does need some quick wins, and he's not getting them. And so we have that. Let me turn to something a little different, and I want to talk a little bit about Trump support.
All right.
Or lack of same. So we have some pretty nice political science pieces here. One that I don't have on the list, I have it on the pundit roundup. I'm just going to add it to the very bottom of the list that I send you so that David can follow along as I ramble. This one is by Ezra Klein, and it's in Vox. A couple of nice Vox pieces today. And this one is called The Mystery of the 2016 Election. The mystery was its normalcy. In politics, one identity rules them all, and going with your Gandalf theme. And in the darkness bind them, I would add. So the whole idea here is Larry Bartel's Vanderbilt University political science, his book, Democracy for Realists. And basically, he's making the pitch, which will not be difficult for any of us to understand, that people basically are incredibly tribal. This may sound familiar to you. And that tribes vote for tribes. So for all of the bizarreness of the election, the Democratic candidate won 89% of Democratic voters, and the Republican candidate won 90% of Republican voters. The Democrat won minorities, women, and the young. The Republican won whites, men, and the old. The Democrat won a few percentage points more of the two-party vote. Just this had happened 4 years before, and 4 years before that. And if you know anything about the candidates or conditions in the 2016 election, but have been asked to predict the results, or if you knew nothing, this is what you would have said happened. This is what's been happening for a couple of years now. The Democrats have a slightly larger majority, but they're not necessarily concentrated in the Electoral College places that make it a lock. And so, there are oddities, but for the most part, tribes vote for tribes.
Yes.
And so you could see that every time something bizarre happens, like all of a sudden Vladimir Putin is popular with Republicans.
Yes, that is weird.
That didn't happen before, but all of a sudden it is. Why? Because Trump said so, and so that's the tribe. And, you'd think that it really can't get so basic that no matter what, the tribe is going to go along, and yet it does. And to make it a little bit more concrete, I have this terrific article, which is the way it should be done, for Sarah Cliff going back and interviewing Republicans who voted for Trump, but not the same group of rabid Republicans who are never going to change. These are people who are in Kentucky and are going to lose their health care.
Yes.
And she's interviewed them before. And she goes back and interviews them again now that the Affordable Care Act is, threatened with whatever's happening in the Senate. We'll get to that. But she goes back and she talks to them. And it's just an exact illustration of what Larry Bartels was saying.
Okay.
These people hate the idea that the Affordable Care Act is going to pass. They're souring on the bill. It's a deep red area of the country. It's very unpopular.
Oh, the AHCA.
Yeah, what the Republicans are doing.
Right. Okay.
Right? They like Obamacare. They like Connect.
Sure.
But they weren't mad at their Congress member, Hal Rogers, who voted to pass AHCA. Okay? And they don't regret their vote for Trump. I don't have regrets, she said plainly. She trusts that Rogers, whom she also voted for, the Republican representative, knows what he's doing. She gets most of her news from his weekly emails to constituents. She cites his arguments for why the law needs to be repealed. Now, you may remember, this is a lady who actually has a job signing up people for Obamacare. She's dependent upon it both for her job and for her health. And she says, I hate what's going on. I'm still voting for the Republican. Mm-hmm. They felt like they had picked a side, and now they were going to stick with it. And Sarah Cliff points out nobody is going to lose more than the people in this particular area. Okay? And she'll interview people, and they'll tell you, from what I've read, this is not going to be good for anybody. And she did find a voter who said he's a one-issue voter, and if they do this, he's not going to vote for Republicans, and he would expect everybody around him to feel the same, except they don't. Yeah. So she went, Sarah Cliff did, and interviewed all these people. They didn't like the Republican bill, but they didn't think it would change their votes. They basically said, you just have to pick a side and stick with it.
Okay.
And they said that just, flat out. We choose what party we place our values with. We're supposed to trust them to do for us, what our party stands for. And it's true that this is going to test the limits because the bill is so unpopular. So her final conclusion is Obamacare enrollees, at least here in Kentucky, probably won't rise up en masse to oust Republicans such as Darrell Issa in California.
Well, no, they can't.
But the vote could haunt those members by driving angry Democrats to turn out in greater numbers and persuading some dismayed Republicans not to turn out at all.
Yes.
And so basically that's how that works. It makes people like Jon Ossoff in Georgia competitive. Doesn't mean that they have a lock to win. How can somebody as weak as Karen Handler or Gianforte, the guy in Montana who body slammed the reporter, actually win? Because their tribe will support them no matter what for now. But not in the numbers that they used to.
Sure.
So if you have somebody who's actually a better candidate than the fellow who was running in Montana, Quist, who had his own issues that the Republicans exploited, not paying his bills and that kind of thing. And if you have somebody who's going to, be a better candidate, you're going to do better, and that's what's happening in Georgia. Now, that doesn't mean Ossoff wins. It's basically a tie. The last poll was a 1-point lead for Ossoff, which is essentially a tie. The article calls it a lead. It's not a lead at all. And there are people who hate Karen Handel and are still mad at her for what she did at Komen, Susan G. Komen, in regard to Planned Parenthood. Think she's a terrible candidate, but she's a Republican and will still vote for her. So the question is going to be, who turns up? You ready with your keyboard? Enthusiasm.
You didn't give me enough long.
Enthusiasm.
I got that.
There you
Fast
go.
enough, though.
And so, you have to see who turns out and who doesn't. And that's not going to be very long because it's going to be on the 20th of this month. So we'll see what happens there. But, if you wonder, why is it even close? That's why it's close. It's all tribal. And yet, I still think I'm right that not everybody is the same. It's not monolithic. There are drop-offs in that enthusiasm vote, in the top vote, in the strongly support vote. And that may wind up mattering when it comes time to, see who actually turns out.
Yeah.
You just can't look for it in places like Montana, which you would expect a 20 or 15 point, Republican win. And then say, gee, you didn't win, therefore it's not true. Well, if you cut it in half and you make it a 6-point lead, or, if with Jon Ossoff, who shouldn't even be competitive and yet he is, it matters. And that's why people analyzing these races say, you know what, the Democrats are actually outperforming what you'd expect them to do in these special elections, even though they haven't won much.
Yeah, well, there's no other explanation for it. And the tribal thing, always a valid argument. And it's true. I mean, we do it too. I think of Democratic and progressive disappointment with all sorts of things, bankruptcy bills in the past, any number of things that we thought that Democrats didn't perform on or that they passed that were just backwards and out of keeping entirely with ideology. And yet we say, well, but there's this issue, that issue. We can't trust these other issues to the hands of the Republicans.
But that goes back to something we talked about on the show, I think Monday, if not earlier. And that is that the parties are asymmetric. They're not the same.
That's true, too.
Republicans are much more likely to vote Republican because Republican and Democrats, we're Democrats, like the Will Rogers old line. We don't belong to an organized party. We're Democrats. So we're much more likely to have political infighting about whether it's a good bill or a bad bill or whether that's the right policy or not a right policy, and then feel badly about it after and maybe be angry about it. And so you get 89% instead of 90% turnout. And the Republicans will say, yeah, it was stupid. I don't like it. I'm really angry with you. Maybe I'll kill you, but I'm still voting Republican.
Kentucky. You got to come up with something to make me feel better.
It's still the old, Democrats fall in love and Republicans fall in line, because it still happens. So meanwhile, what else is happening? Well, today, I guess, is the day that tomorrow is Comey.
Yes.
But today is Coates.
Oh.
So Dan Coates, who is the DNI top intelligence official, goes to Congress,
DNR.
and he has been in the papers. There's this article in the Washington Post. Top intelligence official told associates Trump asked him if he could intervene with Comey on the FBI Russia probe.
Do not intervene. This is DNI.
This is a kind of a point that people might want to remember, that this is one of the articles of impeachment against Nixon. And the revelation that this actually happened is what made Nixon resign. So it's kind of a big deal.
Yes. But you have to realize things. And if you can't realize things...
Yeah. I mean, one of the things you have to realize is it's 2017 and tribal, and so Republicans don't care.
Yes.
Right? So but that is happening today, and then Comey tomorrow. And as a result of the Comey thing, there's already a super PAC. They tried to put together a war room, and they couldn't because they're too incompetent.
Yeah, I heard about that.
So now they have a super PAC, and they actually have an ad running already.
Well, that they can do.
Against Comey, narrated by Tomi Lahren, fired by the Blaze.
Yeah.
And she's not all that talented, but she's blonde.
Yes.
And so, has the look and fits the image that Trump voters are looking for. And basically trying to attack Comey as being a showboat.
Well, he's not running for anything, so good luck with
your ad. He's a showhorse, not a workhorse.
Yeah. Whatever. I mean, Trump. Hello. But okay.
Hello.
You're gonna
exactly.
And Tomi Lahren, for that matter.
So while that's, how that's going to go, I don't know. The expectation is that the Comey thing will be less dramatic than, perhaps the end of one of those Agatha Christie movies. Oh. But he'll make his points, and then it'll all be up to Mueller, and then we'll see what happens there, and that's going to be slower developing. So part of the way to distract from that is to, make these ads and then put them up and say, well, you can't trust him, of course, which is only going to make people pay attention to what Comey's actually saying. And then the other part of distracting is nominating Christopher A. Wray, W-R-A-Y, a man of impeccable credentials, says Donald Trump, to be the new director of the FBI.
Impeccable.
Details to follow. He's probably qualified. I think he actually had a position in the Department of Justice at some point. Some people felt he was guilty of politicizing the department, but others will say, well, he's at least qualified, which is something more than a lot of cabinet members that currently exist is true. And so whether or not it should be that he is nominated at all during this investigation, or whether he should recuse himself, or how well that works with Sessions and Devin Nunes over at the House Intelligence Committee is unclear. So lots of questions about that. But I doubt Trump will be answering any of those questions right at the moment. We'll have to see how that plays out. First comes the testimony from Coates and Comey, and I think that's actually going to be bigger news despite Donald Trump's attempts.
Yes. Word is that there's some possibility that Trump may end up live tweeting Comey's testimony, or at least trying
he said
to
that if he feels the need, that he's not going to hesitate to do that.
By which he means feels the need to go to the bathroom and take his phone with him.
I suppose. So while all this is happening, Eric Trump.
Yes.
I still am trying to figure out which is the dumb one of the two sons, but it could be.
For some reason they say it's Eric. I don't think that Don Jr. is any smarter, but I don't know.
But I think Eric is the one that tends to say things that everybody says you're supposed to think but not say. So he attacks rant targeting Democrats, says, to me, they're not even people.
Okay.
To me, they're not even people. This, is kind of reminiscent of, 1931 to 1945. 1933 to 1945.
I can't tell what to make of it because, these are the sorts of things that he says that make people think he's dumb, like he doesn't have any idea what that means. And so he says dumb
is he
stuff.
the one that was tweeting white supremacist?
That was mostly Don Jr.
That was mostly Don Jr.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I don't know.
I think Eric just doesn't know what the hell he's doing.
Yeah. It's odd. It's something that perhaps would be best stayed away from, and he didn't. He went there. So again, we'll see how this goes. This all comes down to Trump getting very nervous about what Comey's doing and what perhaps Coates might say. And as a result, they're putting together a let's rally the base around us and to hell with everybody else kind of approach, which has about the same competence as his international outreach. And likely it's going to wind up having the same result, which is alienating a whole lot of people that didn't need to be alienated had he done just a little bit more competently.
But are they even people?
Well, that remains to be seen. They vote. I don't think they have 3/5 status.
Now they vote. Yeah, okay.
Here's a couple of, again, more look at Trump voters. This is from Monkey Cage and matches something that Nate Silver had tweeted, and I think we discussed on the show a little while back. It's time to bust the myth. Most Trump voters were not working class.
Oh, that wasn't, okay. I thought that was,
Nate had done it. This is another one. This is from the Monkey Cage blog, from the political
right.
scientist.
Well, sure. Okay. Second.
Household income, Trump supporters didn't look overwhelmingly working class during the primaries. To the contrary, many polls showed that Trump supporters were mostly affluent Republicans. We commented about this throughout the campaign. For example, a March 2016 NBC survey showed only a third of Trump supporters had household incomes at or below the national median of $50,000. Another third made $50,000 to $100,000. Another third made $100,000 or more, and was true even when we limited the analysis to only non-Hispanic whites. If being working class means being in the bottom half of the income distribution, the vast majority of Trump supporters were not working class.
And that's a pretty big if, I guess. You don't know exactly what the hell they mean by that, but
right. They also said that far from being a magnet for the less educated, Trump seemed to have about as many people without college degrees in his camp as you'd expect any successful Republican candidate to have. They weren't majority working class in the general election either.
Okay.
So many of the voters without college education who supported Trump were relatively affluent. The graph below, these are the small business owners that they keep going back and interviewing.
Joe the plumber.
Who owns the plumbing business.
Yeah.
They didn't ask his workers.
Right. Oh, yeah.
They asked the guy who owns the business, who basically are small town Republican tribal, and so, duh. The graph below breaks down white non-Hispanic voters by income and education. Among people making under the median household income of $50,000, there were 15 to 20% point difference in Trump support between college and those without, but the same gap was present and larger among Americans making more than 50 and 100. To look at it another way, among white people without college degrees who voted for Trump, nearly 60% were in the top half of the income distribution. 1 in 5 white Trump voters without a college degree made over $100,000 a year. In short, the narrative that attributes Trump's victory to a coalition of mostly blue-collar, white, and working-class voters doesn't match the data.
Chris Arnade, call your office.
Yeah, so Jared Yates Sexton.
What?
Jared Yates Sexton is his name. And he's a reporter.
Who?
And he's got a little tweet storm here that I included in your list. That working class space myth never bore out in my reporting, he says.
Okay.
Rallies filled with middle class and wealthy. Trumpism is ideology, not class.
I thought you were saying Jared Yates is sexting you or something. Like what?
Sexton, S-E-X-T-O-N is his last name. Get your mind out of the gutter. For 2 hours.
Where am I going to put
that, you can go back. All right, so
it's shaped so well for my. Okay.
It was easier to blame it all on education and class than look at strains of racism, selfishness, and nihilism, which fueled this thing. This will warm Armando's heart because this is a lot of what he has been saying.
Okay.
Working class myth meant Trumpism could be cured, but the truth is some Trump supporters simply don't believe in community.
Yes.
Now, I'll emphasize some,
right.
and I'll emphasize the idea that they don't believe in community, because I'll get to that too. Contingents voted because of, quote, economic anxiety, but that was never reason enough. A vote for Trump was a vote against shared country.
Yes.
Remember, we've talked about shared themes and shared values here. And what he's saying is that we have a whole group of people here, the true believers, the 22%, who are the Trump Breitbart base.
Yes.
Who don't believe in the same shared values we do.
No, not in
I'm not saying they're not human. I'm not Eric Trump. But I am saying they have a different view of the country.
Yes.
Which is why, Jared Yates Sexton says, which is why media keeps running Trump voters are sticking with him stories. They think all of them were duped. Some were, but a lot weren't. Again, it gets back to the sum. There's always a contingent that you can talk to, which has been my point all along. The others, the deplorable basket.
Yeah.
They think Trump won because poor were too stupid to understand. But many of Trump's voters knew. They cast a vote against shared society. It's all about this American myth that the poor are stupid and failed. Only those people could give us Trump. But the problem is nuanced. Wealthy people love Trump because they don't want the burden of helping, and some because they're racist and nihilistic. It isn't just the poor. So you've got middle class and upper class people who just don't want to give any money to those people and would rather see programs go down, even if they use it themselves, than to share it with those other people who they don't want in their communities.
Yes. They were very explicit about not sharing society. If you just pause for a minute and ask, well, what does it mean when they scream at people, "Get out of my country"?
Mm-hmm.
That
or when Sarah Palin said, "This is real America." What does that mean?
Right. So no surprise there.
So it didn't start with Trump. It goes back to Palin and way beyond that.
Well, yeah. Hundreds of years.
George Wallace.
Gangs of New York.
Yeah. So, tribal.
Like
so I have this piece. I put together a short tweet storm here. And it was based on noting there's this article that Katie Rogers posted. Kids are quoting Trump to bully their classmates, and teachers don't know what to do about it. It's in BuzzFeed.
Yeah, I did see that story. And, we saw that immediately after the election.
Yes.
Stories like this. Yes.
So I thought maybe we should talk about permission structures, which is an old term, but popularized by the Obama White House. As a matter of fact, there was this Ezra Klein piece from 2013, because Obama came to the microphone, and sometimes he's a little bit too professorial and wasn't really talking to America, the way that America likes to be talked to sometimes.
Yes,
and he said the point of Obama's whole permission structure riff was to persuade the media to stop blaming him for Republican intransigence. This looks quaint now. And begin blaming Republicans for Republican intransigence. But talking about permission structures sounds academic and passive. It's definitely not what LBJ would have done. And so it just gave the media a new reason to blame the president for Republican intransigence. Obama came to the microphone and basically said, you really have to understand that it's okay for Republicans to work with us. And then he explained that this is permission structure, and that's where he lost everybody.
Oh.
Because reporters don't like to be lectured to or taught.
I see. Well,
right? They only want to do who's yelling at who and what's the gossip. So they started making fun of him, and that's where this all came from. But this whole idea of permission structure comes from the idea that it's not easy to do certain things unless somebody else gives you permission.
Yes.
And the way that David Axelrod used it in the election is that you need a permission structure that allows white people to vote for a black man.
Yes.
You have to build it slowly. You can't do it by, let's say, having Henry Louis Gates tell you it's a good idea. Mm-hmm. You have to have respected people from within a different outside community come and tell you to do that. So, in other words, you get white endorsements in order to tell white people it's okay to vote for the black man. That's the basic idea of a permission structure from a political perspective.
Yes. You know what I call that?
What?
Yard signs.
Yeah, well, to a certain extent, it's true.
That's exactly
because if you see yard signs in your neighborhood, then it's okay for you to put up one, or even if you don't put up one, it's okay for you to vote for that person because your neighbors are doing it.
That's 100% dead on, exactly what I was talking about. And you remember that I was a complete moron, of course.
I keep making fun of you
they don't vote. Yeah,
the purpose of yard signs and the purpose of going to rallies or wearing a campaign button or putting a bumper sticker on your car is that. The problem is not you, but other people who think that the number of yard signs that you see is therefore a measure of support. That's what people are making fun of.
Yes.
Not the idea that it's okay for the permission structure.
Yes, well, now 12 years later, I now have permission to be right about that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You do. You're welcome. So what I said, look, it's third-party validation allowing one to express concepts. For whites to vote for a black man, other whites had to say yeah. And that's a real kind of thing. But there's now a Trump permission structure. He won. So therefore, it's okay to think and act like him. And so thinks his base, the rally goers.
Yes. All right.
And it explains why, when he's boorish and crude, he gets their support anyway. They agree with him. They think everybody is out for themselves, just like him. How come exposing Trump University as a fraud and a con didn't turn off voters? Because they think everybody's like that. And if you say you're not, you're lying. Because they are.
That could be.
He is, and he's just being honest about it.
Yes. Well, luckily they're Christians.
But now that they have a permission structure, they can just flat out say it to your face. You're a liar because everybody's a crook like him, okay? So I'm voting for him. Tough. They think that if you deny it, you're lying. There's no international order, only us versus them, and we have to win. And so it's perfectly okay to disrespect NATO and London and the mayor of London and all that stuff. You know, the mayor of London was incredibly solicitous of us after Orlando and other things like that. But he gets into a fight with this guy because, you know, it's us versus them. And besides, his last name is Khan, and he's not being solicitous enough of the President of the United States, and so on and so forth. And his voters now have permission from Donald Trump to disrespect London and the British and NATO, and you know, it certainly helps Putin. But, you know, it's okay to do that. They think that all this PC stuff is lying about what you really think, I wrote.
Yeah.
Hence the alt-right tweeting of vile stuff about Muslims in America first. They think women are objects, and if you're famous, you can do anything you want, and I'm probably right about that, at least for a short period of time. See Bill Cosby trial. And if Trump does it, they can do it too. Which, by the way, it turns out they can't.
No, but also part and parcel of the kids making fun of one another in school.
Yes.
Yes.
There are many things that are wrong with Trump being in the White House, but the unleashing of dark forces because of permission structure might be the worst. That was my observation there.
Yes, we need yard signs that say this is not okay, I guess. I'm not sure how you fix it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't vote, so we might as well use them for something else.
Mm-hmm. So, anyway, there's that.
I like it.
Which, by the way, reminded me, as we were starting to talk about all of the stuff, you know, wrapping up what we talked about this morning, about how chaotic everything is, about how we wrote 5 months ago about how Trump was a chaos agent.
Yes, you certainly did.
And we go back there. I have that tweet storm then. I don't know if my reporter friends have wrapped their heads around the reality I said on January 22nd.
Oh.
But Trump is a chaos agent. He threatens norms. He doesn't care. He exists to disrupt. The idea he's here for jobs and security is an illusion. There's no security with a disruptor, no stability. He threatens tradition and that which binds us together under rule of law. Look at him with Comey. Look at him with NATO. And for all the angst about cultural clash, rural, urban, and economic anxiety, the idea of America deserves defending and preserving, not chaos. We have a different view. We don't think that everybody's in it for themselves, and that's the best way to live. So we differ with his base. And for all the claims about Trump getting rid of PC, this can't be an excuse to attack the minority because of majority rule. That's offensive. He's opposed because those that oppose him are offended, people like us. It isn't partisanship alone. It's fighting to preserve the American ideal. And if you don't see him as a chaos agent, you're wasting your time chasing down each outrage. That's not the story. His desire to disrupt is. So start by understanding, I said on January 22nd, that he's hired people like Kellyanne Poles and Sean Spicer to lie to your face and dare you to do anything about it.
Yeah.
You know what? That hasn't changed.
No, that appears to hold up very well.
Meanwhile,
what an odd chaos agent for a guy who can't, he will only sleep in his own bed. He only wants steak and ketchup and Diet Cokes.
He wants to be at the pinnacle. He wants everybody else in the basement.
I mean, yeah, it's weird though for a creature of habit to be a chaos agent.
Yeah. Well, the whole idea is that if everybody else is fighting amongst themselves, they can't knock him off his pinnacle.
I guess that's it. And so I guess another manifestation of I got mine, screw the rest of you. And the fewer of you who get yours, the more there is for me to get, I guess. So
big story in Forbes, how Donald Trump shifted kids' cancer charity money into his business.
Yes. Big story.
And this is really a big con. And so this is going to really test this whole tribal thing as you watch people come out and try to defend this.
Yes, it'll make them uncomfortable. I don't know if, like you said, the tribalism pretty strong.
Yeah, so we'll see there. All right, a couple of other stories here. It's interesting. This is Dylan Scott talking about what's happening in the Senate with healthcare.
Okay.
And it's entitled, Show Them a Body. The Senate Republicans are prepared to take a failed vote on Obamacare repeal. Not their first choice, but it may be the only option, and then if it fails, only then can they move on. If they leave it out there and don't do anything about it, they'll never be able to escape. You need to do the next thing. You need to do this thing. You still haven't done this. You still haven't done that. They have to vote on it one way or the other. And that's the pressure really that's bringing this to a head that makes it sound like there's going to be a vote soon.
Okay. Why not a chaos thing and don't vote on it?
Well, because then you still leave all that pressure on the Republicans with the town meetings that they go to, everybody dumping on them about health care. They want to get past that.
Doesn't want chaos for them yet.
So they would like less chaos. And the only way to do that is to once and for all, do we have the votes or do we not have the votes?
All right.
Matt Fuller, who follows congressional doings quite closely, says, trust me when I tell you this, Senate Republicans are closer than ever to repealing Obamacare, but they're still kind of far away.
Okay.
So, again, those are the pressures that are making them try to at least do one thing or another thing. And if they don't have the votes, then they could say, okay, we didn't have the votes. It's interesting, though, because since they're trying to do it with reconciliation, it's harder to blame Democrats when it fails. And recent Kaiser polling does say that if it does fail and if everything is chaotic and if Trump still doesn't support the ACA that remains behind, then 2/3 of the public blame Republicans, even though the Republicans are going to try to blame Democrats because that's what they do.
Yes.
So awfully interesting in an awful way because it's terrible and awful that it's even up there for discussion.
A lot of awful involved in that.
Right. Anyway, that's my wrap up for today. I think that we have the international stuff which is growing. I think more and more people overseas, countries overseas, real capitals, big cities that aren't capitals, are getting rather upset with Trump. I think that in retrospect, the only way to look at his international trip was a disaster. So I'm torn. It's nice to have him out of the country because we don't have him, but then again, the rest of the world does, and that usually doesn't work out well. So maybe he shouldn't be taking any more of these trips anytime soon. I don't think he necessarily enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure he enjoyed the sword dance in the orb, but
right.
Other than that, it didn't go particularly well. And he's going to be consumed. All reports are saying he's totally consumed, watching cable daily, all day. It's all he does. And, this Comey stuff is on the air all the time, so it gets him upset. So maybe he will wind up live tweeting it.
Yeah.
So the domestic program is not going well. The international program is not going well. He's basically a failed presidency. This could have been predicted from the time people looked and said, you know what, he's really not qualified for the job. And still, only about a third of the media seems to be able to just flat out say that. The other 2/3 still do everything they possibly can to try to normalize him and then talk about, well, maybe this is finally the pivot, Maybe he'll finally do this on healthcare. Maybe he'll finally do that on tax reform. He rolled out infrastructure this week, which was a big nothing burger. Nobody paid attention. And they're still talking about Coates today and Comey tomorrow. So, nope, didn't work.
Oh, well. Too bad about that.
Yeah, that's how it goes. Sorry.
Okay. Well, man, there is a lot. The thing was a disaster. I definitely have that. Somebody did dig up the other day, by the way, from that trip. Yeah, the what do we say? Qataris. The
Qatarites.
I don't know how to say.
Get your mind out of Qatar.
But their emir was, I guess, present at the summit and may have even had his hands on the orb, the all-seeing orb, at the appropriate time. But it was not hard to dig up, as someone in my timeline did yesterday, and unfortunately I didn't put it aside. But it was a good point. Maybe 2 weeks old, the video of Trump sitting in the quick grip and grin chair setup, greeting the emir and talking about what great friends we are with Qatar and such a valuable ally in the fight against terrorism. And then as soon as he's not face to face with the guy, he runs away and says, "The Saudis gave me a gold medal and said you suck." So you do.
Yep.
Interesting.
I'll leave you with that, and hopefully there'll be enough material and maybe more to take us for another hour because David is still on the air even though I'm getting off. Thanks so much for talking with us this morning and listening to us. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman, Kagro in the morning. Thanks so much for listening every day. And I'll be back tomorrow, and David will be back tomorrow hopefully too. Yes. How's your refrigerator?
It's still on vacation.
Oh, dear.
So I think we're going to have to stick with
Take
Monday.
Take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning.
I can't. There's no water.
So we'll perhaps not bring that up too often.
Yeah, Monday is looks like that's just the soonest we're going to get them in here, and then
okay, but at least you have a scheduled day. That's
right. We got the part. We think the part works. We don't know because it's not in there yet. We'll see. Hopefully Monday is the day, and it won't. Well, hopefully it won't totally disrupt the program. We'll see what we can do to get it broadcast and hopefully live. We'll have to move our setup again.
We did last time. We'll do it this time,
it worked the first time. And this time it's like a 2 hour
I'll send Abby over to supervise. That always works.
Please. And she can watch him while he works. Okay. Make sure
you're ready. Take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right. Thanks very much, Greg. Good start. We, of course, have Joan McCarter coming later on. Pretty soon we'll be hearing. I'll get the little hand wave from her. I hear you. I'm coming. It's going to be just a couple of minutes. We'll catch up on what's going on. Well, hell, with everything else, and we can talk about anything. You can talk about yard signs if you want to. I am vindicated, finally, on yard signs. Perhaps 8, 10 years too late, but I'm a patient man. I'm not. I really wanted to be right immediately, and I'm sorry it took so long. What can we talk about? What can we throw in that hasn't been covered? There's a hell of a roundup all over the board there, Greg. Thanks very much for touching on so many of the important topics. Big story for me yesterday. I'll tell you what, I'm not paying a lot of attention to Eric Trump's comments about Democrats not being people. I don't even know what to make of that. I think it was pretty well summarized by Greg and by everybody who's addressed the subject. Gosh, that's disgusting. More substantive, in my view, was the story about the abuse of his charity. And I will say I didn't quite get around to the point of feeling bad for Eric in this. Although, certainly no real sympathy for him. He is who he is, and it's gonna cost you. That's all that's all I can tell you. But I don't know. There was a twinge of something there. The basics of the story you likely have already heard, and you imagined it to be true. When we learned about the way Donald Trump operated the Donald J. Trump Foundation, it immediately occurred to us that because there was an Eric Trump Foundation, and because they were closely related, and they did have interaction as between the two foundations, we wondered whether the Eric Trump Foundation was being run in similar fashion, and whether Eric Trump had simply learned from his father to profit from the operation of this supposedly charitable foundation. And we found, I think at the time, we learned that, it was more or less run on the up and up. And for a long time it was. The Forbes magazine is the outlet responsible for breaking this story, as I recall. Although, I guess there were some hints at stuff back when David Farenthold was doing his work on the Donald Trump Foundation. But we mostly set aside the question of the Eric Trump Foundation because it had, very wisely, I think, right out of the box, decided that the money it raised would be spent by, that is to say, donated to St. Jude's, which is a pediatric, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, pediatric cancer research and care facility. And I think really a gold star charity in terms of its reputation and, outside audits of how they use their money and the things that they do. And like a lot of charities, there's probably more overhead than there absolutely positively needs to be, but it's one of those things. It's just so long as they're net positive and doing some great things, it's hard to to tarnish yourself by spending your time and donating your money, or even money that you raise from other people, to St. Jude's. And reading the beginning of the piece, Dan Alexander, I believe, is the reporter on the Forbes piece. Reading the beginning of the piece really gives you the best possible view of Eric Trump himself, like as a person. in all this. He basically, the story is he graduates from Georgetown University, a fine academic institution, and is looking for something to do with himself in life, essentially. And he comes to the conclusion, for whatever reason, maybe just, I don't know, this is what rich people do, but that's okay. That's a fine way to come to the conclusion that he wants to do something charitable. And he chooses to raise money for the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, which is, by the way, in Memphis, Tennessee. And he doesn't even really have a particular reason for it. According to the article, they ask him, what is it? Did you know somebody whose child was treated there, or you know somebody with pediatric cancer? What was it? And he really kind of, I'm looking for the quote, but he basically just says, I don't know, I just wanted to do something good, and they seemed like a good place, and they had, they had a good reputation, and you can't go wrong funding research into cancer in general, and pediatric cancer in particular. These guys have a sterling reputation. I just thought I'd raise some money, like rich people do. And that was great. That was the best thing he's ever said, as far as I know. And so he starts a Eric Trump Foundation, and most of the money ends up going to St. Jude's, and he gets a bunch of friends, probably like just college buddies or whatever, together. He knows he's got to have a board of directors. I think they put 7 of his buddies and maybe a family member or two, who knows, on the board of directors. And for years, they spent about $50,000 in overhead, but they held a successful charity golf tournament. And the leverage here, the competitive advantage, if you will, if you can speak that way about charities, that the Eric Trump Foundation held was, my family owns golf courses. We can have a charity golf tournament and charge people money to play in it and all that stuff, and donate the money, and we don't have to pay to use the golf course. So our overhead will be very low. And for years, it worked pretty much exactly that way, and everything was fine. As the story goes on, and I don't really need to spend a whole lot of time on it, I got the gist of it. This time I read the article ahead of time. See what I could be doing with these things. Armando says that there's why St. Jude's he hints that one of the answers may be that there's a PGA golf event that is affiliated with St. Jude's. I don't know whether there was any business relationship in all of that, or it might just be I was watching golf and I saw that event and I was like, okay, children's cancer. But it was actually quite clear that he hadn't given a great deal of thought to it. But again, I was more than okay with that. The idea that he would say, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I just know I want to give money to charity because that's what rich people do. And it's about the minimum amount of thought you can give into it and still be a good guy. But fine. So what? I'm not particularly talented, maybe. I'm not particularly smart, although I went to Georgetown, whatever. Money could have been doing the talking there. I have access to money. I got access to the golf courses. I like playing golf. It'll be fun for me to do. It'll be easy for me to deal with. It's something I understand. And in the end, money will go to pediatric cancer research. That is fine. That's more than fine. That's actually thinking outside yourself. I love it. It was fantastic. Sure enough, eventually, the problem becomes he lets Dad touch his project. Why? Why not, right? My dad's my hero. He's a financial genius, et cetera, et cetera. What could go wrong? It's a financial thing. So I'll let my dad, try and direct me in this thing. And that's when the whole thing falls apart and goes to crap. And only certain words I can use on the air here because we're being simulcast by our good friends in Washington, D.C., We Act Radio, and Rochester Free Radio as well. So we don't want to ruin anything for these guys who are working so hard to keep their FCC licenses. But that's what happens. As the article outlines, at some point, and I'll see if I can find the year for you, but they make a very clear, somewhere along the line, there's a very clear demarcation, at which point 4 of his original 7 board members resign. The board itself is expanded to like 14 seats, And as it turns out, in the end, after the revamping of the board, 9 of the 14 members of the board are people who draw their income chiefly directly from the Trump organization. And that's when things begin to go awry. For the first couple of years, he is paying nothing for the golf course, paying about $50,000 annually in overhead, and raising, $250,000 plus, sometimes even more, for St. Jude's. And then at some point, according to the director of operations at the golf course where they hold the event, it's the Trump course in Westchester County, New York, that Donald Trump himself begins to see the paperwork on this stuff and begins asking questions. What the hell is this that we're giving away all this free use of the golf course? Well, it's the charity event. It's Eric's charity event. The whole hook for his fundraising is that he doesn't have to pay for the golf course. And that's been the line since forever. And in fact, one of the major points of controversy, well, we'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, Donald Trump says, I don't care who it is, they're getting billed for the use of the course. Which, interestingly, actually that's kind of the best way to try and keep things arm's length here. But of course, Trump can't do that. And it's one of the better reasons why you don't, one of the things that self-dealing laws help prevent by demanding that there be arm's length transactions is you start to prevent things like, well, I'll hold the event at my family's course because then, if I do, it's fine if it's donated for free. That's actually not so bad. But you start to get into a lot of weird things when it's family, when it's friends, and you're doing other than having a market transaction for the use of the course. And so Donald, not with that in mind, that's the problem, begins to say we got to be charging him. And they started charging him, $50,000 or so for renting the course for the day in order to hold the fundraiser. But then Donald begins to see, hey, I can get away with even more. Maybe we should be charging $100,000 for the use of the golf course for the day. And Eric, apparently, I would guess Eric at some point gets a little antsy about this and says, we're only raising $200,000 net for St. Jude's, and you're going to be charging me half of that for the use of the golf course. And Donald comes up with a brilliant solution, because to him, all money is his money, and he has no understanding of the difference between having custody of money or anything else and having ownership of it. If it's in my hands, if I have custody of it, I own it. I can do whatever I want with it. There's no difference between charitable monies and for-profit monies. Commingling it, we saw that from Farenthold's investigation on our own discussion of things. So he says, tell you what I'll do. The Donald J. Trump Foundation is full of cash, other people's money. What I'll do is I'll take $100,000 from the Donald J. Trump Foundation and I'll give it to the Eric Trump Foundation. And that's got to be on the up and up because it's still a charity, right? It's really not, et cetera, et cetera. We discussed why. It's not his money, but he takes this stuff and he gives $100,000 from the Donald J. Trump Foundation to the Eric Trump Foundation, thinking, well, that'll help offset the costs of what I charge you to use the golf course, so it's no skin off your nose or off of the noses of any of your donors. It's still a net zero to you. That doesn't really work that way. Fungibility of money, the different kinds of funds and nonprofit and charitable funds, because what ends up happening is, think about what he means. He actually means for them to do is to take Donald J. Trump Foundation charitable donations from other people, give $100,000 of it to the Eric Trump Foundation, and then have the Eric Trump Foundation use that $100,000 to rent the golf course from the Trump organization, which is for profit, which means that what Donald has figured out here is, how can I take $100,000 worth of charitable donations that other people made and turn it into $100,000 of for-profit dollars for the pocket of Donald J. Trump? And that's what he does. He launders other people's charitable donations into profit for him. Now, once he's done that, and once he's convinced Eric somehow to make this change that ends up driving half of his friends from the original board of directors from the Eric J. Trump Foundation to resign and to replace them with a board of 14 members, 9 of whom are connected directly for their livelihoods to the Trump organization. Things begin to change. And by the way, who are we talking about? Well, for one thing, he puts his wife, Lara, on the board. Not so unusual, but that's where Lara gets her money. She gets her money from Eric. And where does Eric get his money? The Trump organization. Who else got a seat on the board? Not, all of his friends are pretty much gone. Some of them remain. Michael Cohen, the attorney, says who? That guy? I never traveled anywhere. Here's the cover of my passport to prove it guy. On the board of the Eric J. Trump, or Eric, whatever, everybody's middle initials, the Eric Trump Foundation. Dan Scavino, who now works in the White House as well, somehow ends up on the board of the Eric Trump Foundation. Larry Glick, the Trump Organization's executive vice president, is put on the board. Matthew Calamari, who many of you will remember as, wasn't he like the head of security operations? We learn about that guy. He's from the Trump Organization. They just say in the article here he's a Trump Organization executive. He's the security guy. Lynn Patton, former assistant to Eric Trump, current senior advisor to the Trump administration, also ends up on the board. Kerry Woolard, a Trump winery general manager. Eric manages the winery business, remember that. And also Christy Mahfouz, founder of Ace Specialties, the company which sold $16 million worth of goods and services and hats and trinkets and everything to the Trump campaign. All of those guys end up on the board of the Eric Trump Foundation, which, after 2011 or 12 or so, all of a sudden begins being charged and approving the expenditure of not $50,000 for the rental of the golf course that Trump owns, not $100,000, not $200,000. Eventually, they're being charged something in the order of $350,000 for one-day rental of the Westchester County golf course that the family owns, and which the whole premise of Eric's foundation was they wouldn't have to pay anything in order to use this golf course. As soon as Trump figures out that he can do this and he can launder Donald J. Trump Foundation money into personal funds by simply paying it to Eric and his foundation so that Eric can pay the Trump Organization for use of the course, then it's hardly, as long as I cover it, quote unquote, cover it from the Donald J. Trump Foundation, any amount of money I charge you doesn't make a difference. I could charge you $1 billion. If I could come up with $1 billion worth of cash from the Donald J. Trump Foundation and give it to you, what would you care? What's the difference? It's no skin off your nose, and it's no skin off mine either. I'm paying you out of the foundation. I don't care. That's not my money. You don't have to pay any extra out of the Eric Trump Foundation to rent the golf course. So what's the problem here? And Eric, what's he going to do? He's got no idea. He hasn't been brought up in a household that understands or respects these kinds of boundaries. His dad, financial genius, I read it in all the papers, says it's okay, so it must be okay. I don't understand these things. I'm a young guy. All my money comes from him. He seems to know what he's doing. And plus, he's my dad. He's my hero, etc. Imagine, it will never come to this. For one reason, because his father is president of the United States. But anybody else could be in serious trouble eventually for this and be facing, felony fraud charges. I don't know how well they would stick. But the play, of course, would be, listen, you're going to go to jail, prison for, a couple of years for this. And it's not going to be pleasant. I have to imagine that prison for Eric Trump, not a real fun place to be, even if you put him in the, most minimum security prison. Now, of course, he might be, and maybe this is bad news, he might be okay in prison. The Aryan Brotherhood might take care of him in prison. He's not going to look good with a face tattoo. That's probably true. But he'll make it through prison a lot easier. But now you can't threaten him with that because his father's the president. He never believed he's going to go to prison. But for anybody else, you threaten him with that and you say, listen, your old man set you up. He set you up. I know you think very highly of him. I know he's your hero. I know you think he's a financial genius, but in fact, he's financially idiotic. He's a moron. He doesn't know what he's doing, not only because he loses money on everything, but because he's a liar and a cheat and a thief, and he steals from everything that he can get his hands on, and he just stole from you, and you were trying to help kids with cancer. Don't you hate that? Why are you going to go to prison for that, are you? Are you really going to go to prison for that? And he's married now. I don't know if they have any kids. At some point, he begins to think, I can't go to prison. I keep reading all over the place. I used to read for years that my dad was a financial genius, that everything he touched turned to gold. Now I find out everything he touches turns to crap. And he's a liar and a thief at that. Should I go to prison for this guy? And that's when people roll over. On the other hand, most people who are being asked to roll over don't have the confidence in the back of their mind that their co-defendant or their unindicted co-conspirator, who they're really after in all this, controls the Department of Justice. So that's going to throw a monkey wrench into things. I just thought it was really interesting. One, to explain exactly how they were laundering it, and two, to remind Eric that he actually had a good thing going there for a while. I mean, in a legitimate sense, a charity that was low overhead, that was on the up and up, that was giving to a valuable cause, that had conducted itself admirably, but, he was set up right from the outset. This is a good argument. Don't involve yourself in any financial transactions with your family if you can avoid it, even if you trust them. Dumb things happen. So, even when it was just, I'm borrowing Dad's golf course, and then that's leveraging a position that you shouldn't have available to you. Right off the bat, you're not doing things arm's length, but it seems like a good thing. How could it not be a good thing to not charge a charity money, right? Well, it is, except the thing is that it's owned by Donald Trump, and it's only a matter of time before he insists that he's got to have a sip of that blood, too. And then, once he gets a taste, he just needs to drain the whole body, because he's a vampire and a disgusting pig and a dirt bag of the highest order. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's my presentation for the day. Karen tells me that Eric's wife is pregnant with their first child. An excellent time to press him with prison. It just can't happen because his dad's president. All right. Shifting gears, I think, unless you want to talk about Eric Trump, we'll bring in Joan McCarter, senior political writer at Daily Kos. Eric Trump, no doubt a tempting target, but maybe not highest on your list, except to say that he's, his dad's a scumbag.
Well, I did write up that story yesterday.
Did you? Okay, you took care of it.
There were a number of things in it that really irked me.
Okay.
One of which is it made Eric Trump seem almost sympathetic.
Yeah, for just a second there.
For just a second you thought, okay, so...
Keeping in mind that he is president of the foundation, he should just, he could have said, hey, breaks my heart, Dad, but we cannot do this.
Yeah.
That's all.
I mean, he started out with good intentions.
That's all.
Apparently.
Yeah. It was nicely done in the beginning, it seems. And, And
then Dad got his grubby hands on it.
Yes.
And Kusei said, all right.
And I say things like, well, you just say, love you, Dad, but we can't do it with the charity. That's a fine thing to say if you are, an independent person with your own means and can, parlay that Georgetown education into a vast fortune of your own, or even a livable wage of your own. But he really doesn't have any, there wasn't anything else he was going to likely be able to do to make the world work for him. He could start over, but it'd be a hard thing to do as a Trump.
Yes.
So
clearly that Trump.
Yeah. It's possible, but it's a tremendous sacrifice. And honestly, I mean, I'm sure that if he gave it some thought, he would say, why should I sacrifice this much when what I'm trying to do here is get some money to a charity? And honestly, net, I'm not getting any less to the charity. Maybe Dad has a point here. Of course, you could be getting much more to that charity.
Right.
But and now he's getting zero to it because he stopped fundraising entirely, which actually that probably made him look like a bit of a Grinch, but it was actually the smartest thing to do and say, I can't keep using St. Jude's to allow my dad to steal money from other charities, if that's what was on his mind. I think it was
right.
mostly,
Citing conflict of interest appearances is why he got out of it.
So he might be.
But the charity is still there. The foundation still exists, just not the Eric Trump Foundation.
Yes,
and it is
true.
still holding its golf fundraising tournaments at Trump National.
Yeah, right. And as I understand, they just sort of changed the name of the charity, and I think they just continue to use it to siphon money out to. I mean, it still has to pay for the use of the golf course, so that's a major point of leverage. And the story went on to say that basically there's another angle in the story, which is that there are several entities that hold their own golf outings for charity at other Trump properties, and there seems to be this weird relationship wherein the Donald Trump Foundation makes a gift of $50,000 of someone else's money to that organization, and then that organization suddenly becomes interested in holding their charity events at Mar-a-Lago, at the golf courses, at whatever, and end up paying the Trump organization twice or more what Donald J. Trump took from other people to give them in the first place.
Right.
So Donald J. Trump, thieving scumbag. That's it. And Eric got out, and maybe that's that. If it was because it made him feel bad to enable his dad's thieving, that would be great. But he's still Eric Trump.
He's still Eric Trump, and he still doesn't believe Democrats are human.
Yeah, so that's bad. And maybe he believes now, like Obamacare, where some people say they're opposed to it because they wanted single payer. Maybe, yeah, sure. Here's a fantasy for you. Eric Trump doesn't think Democrats are human. He thinks they're superhuman.
Maybe that
could end up being true, but I doubt it. He's also a big game hunter, so I guess that's the answer.
I thought, are they both big game hunters?
Yes, they are. It takes two of them to hold up the dead things they shoot. Anyway, so that's a big story, and it
is a big story.
Eric, I guess.
Not enough of a story that will make anybody turn on Trump, who's a Trump supporter.
Yeah, all right, unless it's Eric's attorney. It's possible. If he has his own attorney, which he doesn't, I'm sure. I'm sure he thinks he has one, but he doesn't because he's paid by the Trump organization.
Right.
So.
Well, it's probably Michael Cohen.
Yeah, most likely.
Who,
or someone
by the
like
way, was on the board.
Yes.
He was, Cohen and Scavino were both put on the board of the Eric Trump Foundation the same year that all of a sudden they had to start paying ridiculous amounts of money for overhead for these Trump tournaments, these St. Jude tournaments, golf tournaments. So
yeah,
they may have hatched that plan. The ballooning of costs happened the same year that most of the buddies of Eric who had been on the board left, and Trump organization, the private side of Trump businesses, took over the board. So,
yep, it makes you think it might have been one of their ideas.
It makes you think.
Yeah. You don't have to think long. We got plenty of time for other things, thankfully, because it's so easy to come to a conclusion. So what else is on your plate these days? I know Congress has been back from their vacation this week, but I haven't heard much about anything going on other than the Senate saying they're making it look like they're going to, like the House, just all of a sudden say the health care bill is done. No, you can't see it. We're voting on it tomorrow.
Kind of looks that way. Although the Senate can't get away with the trick of voting on a bill that has not been scored by the CBO.
Yeah, that they have if they want to use reconciliation for it. Anyway.
Right. So they've got to wait around for that. And chances are the CBO score, because of the things that they're still talking about keeping from the House bill, which we've heard is 70 to 80% of the House bill, it's not going to be a good score. Although they say they will they will reverse what the House did on allowing insurance companies, allowing states to waive the requirement that insurance companies protect people with pre-existing conditions. They're not putting that in apparently, but they are saying states can waive the essential health benefits portion of the regulations, which means that in order to get around the pre-existing conditions thing, insurance companies can offer really crappy plans that sick people won't buy.
I see.
So, there are always ways around it. We're gonna see another bad score. The other thing that they're doing is they're still getting rid of Medicaid, but they're doing it more slowly.
All right. Well, we can keep an eye on that. How are they slowing it down?
They're just having a longer timeline for it to phase out.
Okay. Well, that's just great.
The quote from Ron Johnson.
Okay. Yeah.
Ron Johnson decided to be reasonable on this, sort of.
Weird.
Yeah, weird. But he's not very bright, so he's easily tricked.
Yes.
And here's his quote on Medicaid expansion and slowing down, getting rid of it, or putting in restrictions on it. I don't want to pull the rug out from under anyone, Johnson said, but let's not leave the rug out there for a couple more years to have more people stand on the rug.
That's interesting.
So we're not pulling the rug out, but we're not leaving the rug out there. So there's still a rug. We're rolling it up and stashing it in the corner.
Yes. It's interesting. So I'm not pulling the rug out from anyone. You're just, from now on, no one else is allowed to step on the rug. And if you die when you're on the rug, we'll roll you off. And eventually, okay, I get it. So we're going to put this rug away. Just in the meantime, don't anybody walk on there.
Yeah.
And then when everybody who's on the rug now and refuses to move dies, we'll put the rug away.
Yeah.
Okay. And they might not necessarily wait. We don't want to pull the rug out from underneath anybody, but we might. We just hope that no one else will go stand on the rug between now and then. That actually kind of works as an explanation.
Sure that nobody else will go stand on the rug.
Yes, right. That's
or at
also
least
a different story.
The undeserving people,
right.
The people who shouldn't be standing on the rug, don't get to stand on the rug.
Yes, we might beat
the people
you and
who
break
work
your
a
legs.
job. Maybe they have their own vacuum cleaner.
If you're on
Maybe
the rug
those
to clean
people
it,
can be on the rug.
It's okay. Yes, that's a possibility. That's very strange, but at least it makes sense, and it's not. I've seen worse, by way of metaphors from people.
Yes, including Ron Johnson.
Yes.
Genius.
Oh yeah. So all right.
Whether or not this is really going to happen, who knows?
Yeah.
But I think it will. And I keep seeing the way that Paul Ryan passed it and thinking this is the model that McConnell's going to use. He's going to force it through and he's going to get his 50 votes. Mm-hmm. He's going to allow Rand Paul and Susan Collins to be principled and say no.
Okay.
Knowing that he can bring in Mike Pence and pass the thing. I hate to be pessimistic, but I am.
Mm-hmm.
It just has the earmarks of McConnell forcing this thing through.
Yeah, well.
He's been saying, we'll put it up in one way or the other. Mostly I just want to get it off of our calendar and not have to deal with it anymore. But what he's probably really telling his conference is, you made this promise. You promised for the past 7 years that you were going to do this. So if you don't, it's on you.
That's interesting. That must be a great discussion in the conference. I mean, to me, of course, it would occur to me to say, well, I did say it. You told me to say it. I mean, I did. I was happy to make the promise, but you make it sound like you didn't want to repeal and replace. And I mean, you handed out a sheet of paper. I still have it in my files. It says, go home and say we're 100% dedicated to repeal and replace. And I didn't even need the paper anymore because we said it for 8 years. And now you have to do it because you promised it. Wait a minute. But I don't know. Either they don't care, they're not that smart, they don't remember, they're afraid of Mitch McConnell. I don't know what it is. I don't know how anybody could be afraid of him. But I'm sure he pulls levers in scary ways behind the scenes. If it was
Well, I could be wrong, but this is the way it feels.
It's his job to do that. That's certainly the case. And that's what I would say. But I don't know. It's the whole thing is very strange, and it might trigger some memories in their heads. Wait a minute, we don't deliver on promises. What are you talking about? You're thinking if the other party tries to do that. We don't care what we promised. Oh yeah, that is tough. So I imagine that they want to do something, but
I hope I'm wrong. I
hope so. I guess I hate to say you're wrong, but you're not yet, for one thing. But it wouldn't be bad if you were, and you say so. So I feel like it's okay to agree.
All right.
How's that? I'm not actually crossing you here. So,
the other part of this is, of course, anything that can pass the Senate also has to be reconciled with the House.
Yes.
So there's always that opportunity for it all to fall apart.
That's true. They could pass something, and for all we know, the Freedom Caucus gets upset and says they took out the part where states can get out of the pre-existing conditions restrictions, and we loved that. Although they
did actually love it. That's how they got Freedom Caucus members on board. That's how Paul Ryan got it passed.
So I guess if there's logic out there, which there isn't, you might find some people hung up on that. Otherwise, they'll probably just say this is the best we could get at the moment. We have to do something. I think you're right. That's still the most likely path, no matter what rhetoric McConnell or anyone else uses to move them there. It's still, we're just standing here and everybody's waiting for us to pass something. If it sucks, it sucks. What can you do? Just pass it. And then if it sucks, we'll be done with it for a while. People will forget. We just elected a guy who assaulted a reporter, and we swore him in and everything. Everyone will forget. Don't worry.
Right. By the way, GM Forte is trying to hasten everybody forgetting.
Yes.
He filed for an extension. He was supposed to be in court this morning answering the charge.
This morning.
And he filed for an extension and has requested a settlement. So.
Settlement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I don't know.
Can you even do that? It's not a criminal charge? I don't know. I don't know my criminal procedure in Montana
that's what the Missoulian is reporting.
We're all, a plea bargain, maybe. I don't know. Who knows? There's no law. What am I bothering with this for?
The court document said the parties are currently exploring a settlement of the case and that the extension was not opposed by the state.
Okay. Well, he's a busy guy. There's other reporters to body slam. Well, okay. Is that the sum total of what's actually happening in Congress? And you're not limited to that by any means, of course, but.
Well, we've got right now Dan Coates testifying to the Senate Intelligence Committee, and I have it muted. I know that the first thing Burr brought up was Section 702 reauthorization because, of course, the FISA Act, the Patriot Act, the provisions relating to surveillance are coming up for renewal, and Burr's very concerned about that. So that's out of the gate. The first thing he asked Coates about, according to Twitter, because maybe he doesn't want to talk about the fact that Donald Trump asked Coates to tell Comey to lay off of Russia.
Yeah, I guess that's probably not going to be the first item.
And this is supposed to be a regular briefing.
Okay. Oh, really? Oh, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, this isn't an intelligence committee hearing on Trump and Russia.
Oh.
It's the regular intelligence committee briefing from the DNI and others.
Okay. Well, and tomorrow's briefing, that wasn't supposed
Tomorrow
to be.
Tomorrow's Comey, and that's specifically Trump-Russia.
Like, he wasn't originally scheduled to testify that day as FBI director anyway, and they decided to make it something else?
No.
Okay. Just checking. I mean, that's some interesting juxtaposition, some serendipity to have. Just a regular check-in with the DNI on nothing in particular.
Yeah.
The day before. Okay. Well, of course, you can ask whatever you want in the Senate.
Well, the day before Comey and the day after the news broke that, Trump tried to get him to obstruct justice too.
Yeah. Did we not? I thought that came up a week or two ago that he had asked or that
something else happened.
Yeah.
What was the story
thing?
moved forward last night, and I'm trying to think what the new development was. But there have been so many stories.
Yeah. Well, it seems a lot of stories kind of get not exactly recycled, but updated a little bit, and the basic facts are still there.
Mark Sumner wrote about the new stuff this morning.
Okay, let me check it out, and we'll.
The news spiral is, as Mark is now calling it.
Okay. Oh, while we were sleeping, we lapped Watergate twice. Is that what?
Yeah.
Is that Dan Coates? Man, he's starting to look like Alan Simpson to me. He's just getting older.
Coates and Pompeo. He does look a little like Alan Simpson, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these days, I don't know. Okay, certainly looks like it to me. So Pompeo too, huh? Is he the other one that he asked to? Yeah, I felt like that was something we knew. Yeah, March 22nd, right?
And that broke on May 26th, if I remember correctly. We found that out, but something I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's not a quiz.
What's new out of this? There is something new out of this.
Well, so long as I think we've done our job even in just pointing people to where they could find these new developments be written up on the front page. So, okay, even if we don't know what's in it necessarily, the guy who wrote it does, so go read it. But we'll see if we can't cull something out of that.
Okay, the events involving Coates show the president went further than just asking intelligence officials to deny publicly. That's what it was.
Right.
In May, they reported that Trump had asked them to deny the existence of evidence showing collusion during the election. He said, if somebody asks you, don't say this. But now we find out that in addition to saying there's no evidence showing this, tell Comey to back off.
Yes, okay.
That's what's moving the story forward.
There we go. Two distinct efforts at obstructing justice. And the first of which, by the way, reminds me of the story I read briefly the other day, and I provided everybody in Scott's roundup. But just to remind you, the story from Paste magazine about how the Mercers are funding and staffing the effort to manipulate Google searches so that anybody who's actually trying to find out what the hell's going on and goes to Google the search "no evidence of collaboration" finds not the truth, which is that nobody had said that, and the only time that phrase came up was when Trump was trying to make Coates and Pompeo say it, but then everybody who's spoken publicly about the issue will only say that they haven't yet seen such evidence, and that's a very different thing. But thanks to the Mercers, their money, and their data operation, the first 5 pages of searches on questions about evidence of collusion are Breitbart, InfoWars, Town Hall, and Newsbusters hits saying, quote, there is no evidence of collusion between Trump and Russia. So they're working on multiple fronts.
Excellent.
I'm so glad you can't depend on Google anymore for truth or news. It's not their fault.
It's
entirely
one of the reasons not to use Google.
I guess so, but yeah,
I use DuckDuckGo.
Yeah, is that not the same algorithm? I don't know.
Let me put in DuckDuckGo and say, let's see, what's the search term? Collusion?
Yeah, I should find
the collusion.
Yeah, but I guess you could start by searching on Trump-Russia evidence of collusion. I wonder, did I archive that article? Because I could get the exact phrase. That would be an interesting thing to compare side by side.
First we get Forbes. From May telling us there remains no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion.
Here's the article.
Guardian, CNN, Washington Examiner, National Review, Politico. Yeah, Breitbart doesn't show up on this page at all.
That's pretty good. Yeah, let me see what the actual that was the first search to do with the Obama. Well, it's okay that Trump told the Russians all of our secrets in the Oval Office because Obama did the same thing with the Bin Laden raid. And what? Who believes that? Well, anybody who uses Google, I guess. Let's see. It was, Trump no evidence collusion was the search term. Not enclosed in quotes, but Trump no evidence collusion. Yeah, what does DuckDuckGo tell you?
All right, I'm putting in that exact.
Good experiment on the air today. I like it. Good radio, maybe.
Yeah, okay. Breitbart does come up as the fifth.
Oh, but that's much better.
We get The Hill, we get Free Beacon.
Okay.
NBC, Forbes.
Still, that's a mix. So I think that's an objective better for DuckDuckGo unless things have changed on Google. I suppose it's possible. Yes, we'll check that on Google.
And also DuckDuckGo doesn't track your searches.
Yes, that was the first.
You have the privacy thing with DuckDuckGo as opposed. So
yeah, that was the big deal. Trump, no evidence, collusion in Google at the moment. It's a little bit better, but still heavily dominated by, like, the first page is Real Clear Politics, which I don't love, but it isn't Breitbart. Forbes, Fox News, Free Beacon, Breitbart, USA Today, The Blaze, Town Hall, National Review. Whereas a couple of days ago, the same result was all right-wing news sites for 5 solid pages, more or less. Daily.
Interesting.
So things may have changed. They may have read the article and have said, we need to tinker with this. But it seems like it's still pretty heavily right-wing influence, and that maybe DuckDuckGo, based on that one trial, might do better for you. So another good reason to try them out.
Yes.
Good point. Good plug. Send us $1 million. And
the little duck icon up in the corner is kind of cute.
That's got to be nice too. Do the Mercers bother spending money to manipulate Bing? I don't know.
Does anybody use Bing?
I don't know. I mean, that might be I don't know whether that's a good reason to start or whether it's useless also. I don't know.
Well, let's give her a try.
I guess. Nobody experimented with Bing. What were some of the other ones that we used to use back in the day? Yahoo, I guess.
Yahoo.
But I haven't searched anything on purpose with Yahoo in a long time.
Trump, no evidence collusion.
Yeah. This is exciting.
AZ Central, Forbes, Fox, The Hill, NBC News.
Sounds pretty good.
Free Beacon, Breitbart. CNN, Real Clear Politics, Washington Examiner, BBC.
That's a fair mix of, I don't mean fair mix. I mean, it's fairly mixed, I guess. And not in the sense that it's fair, but it's much better than Google was getting. But again, good micro-targeting. They were smart. They know where people go to search things. And it's not Bing, and it's so far not DuckDuckGo either. It's Google. That's still my default accidentally. And when I'm working quickly. My fingers just typed that GOO and let the browser fill it in, and I hurry up and get to it.
Well, you can set your browser of choice.
To do. And,
or your search engine of choice in your browser.
Yeah, that way when I just hit the plus button for a new window to work in, it'll just give it to me. And I won't have to remember that. Okay. Wise move, I think. Well,
here with all of your search tips, all of your browser tips.
This is important. If you're going to live your life online, as we do, and as you do too, and you're a member of an online community, or you just you get your news that way, you got to give some thought to that. That was really the whole point of that article.
And if you're a member of an online community, that could end up being the target of political attacks and political hacking.
And that could be anybody.
And that could be anybody. It helps to think about some of the things that you can do to protect yourself. We've talked about that before.
Yes.
We'll keep talking about it.
Have to. Very wise. All right. Let's see. Other items up getting your attention today? Anything else happening, or should we try and call
one
out
of the
some
interesting things happening today is, according to the daily guidance and press schedule for popular vote loser Donald Trump, he will go to Cincinnati, Ohio, and in the afternoon he will meet with Obamacare victims.
Wow. Obamacare victims. All right. Okay. Well,
this is following the news yesterday that Anthem, the big insurance company, is pulling out of 20 counties in Ohio.
Okay.
Where they are the sole insurance company selling policies on the exchange. And why did they do it?
Why?
Increasing lack of overall predictability.
Oh.
Uncertainty. The volatile market, thanks to the uncertainty surrounding key issues, including federal payments that help reduce costs for low-income enrollees. Because of Trump.
Yeah.
Because of Trump, 13,000 Ohioans will not have a choice, probably, on their health insurance exchange next year. And I would call them victims.
They will be eventually. It's just they won't really be Obamacare victims so much as Trump victims, but he's not going to say that.
But Anthem is.
Okay.
Anthem's pointing the finger. Hopefully Anthem will point the finger at Trump in the letters they send to all of their customers saying, sorry, we can't do this anymore.
Yeah. Well, I hope so, and I hope they can do it in a convincing fashion, because people love listening to their insurance providers for guidance. So I don't know how well that's going to work, but it's all you can do is try, I guess.
You gotta try. It's frustrating. Because even if repeal and Trump care don't go anywhere in the Congress, we've got this sabotage happening.
Yes.
Anthem now is deciding whether it's going to stay in 13 states. And it's as many as 275,000 people who have Anthem as their only choice on their exchanges.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's going to be rough. Oops, I got some auto-playing video here. And it's Yahoo. Just to be clear on who screwed us on that one. But Yahoo News. So, okay. Anyway, let's see. Other items that have been of interest in the last couple of days. I've got my list. I don't know if we've exhausted your list in terms of what's top of mind for you, but
what's top of your list?
Well, let's see. Fun things that I saw yesterday that we haven't had a chance to mention yet. Did you see this one? There is I saw Ryan Riley tweeting about this yesterday, and I should look and see if it's been written up anywhere, because all he's got from the tweet yesterday was the PDF of the letter that the Office of the Inspector General in the had initiated, as it says here in the letter, an investigation of a senior executive with the Executive Office for Immigration Review. Have you heard this one?
No.
Okay.
No.
So this is a DOJ Inspector General. So I can briefly go through, the letter's not very long, but I think I might have to just read it because there's so much detail about what, I guess there's a lot of detail about hinting at exactly what happened, but not any names named, because apparently the Office of the Inspector General is only charged to hand over the evidence to the to the correct office and say, well, what are you going to do about it? This is an interesting one, and I haven't seen it written up anywhere yet. So it's a release from the DOJ IG. Findings concerning improper hiring practices, inappropriate interactions with subordinates and a contractor, and false statements by a senior executive with the Executive Office for Immigration Review, which I'm not even familiar with that office, but is that something new that Trump established by way of eliminating immigration and immigrants themselves? I'm not sure. The Department of Justice, Office of the Inspector General, initiated an investigation of this office and this senior executive based on information it's received from DOJ that the official engaged in inappropriate hiring practices, used non-public information to benefit friends, solicited and accepted gifts from subordinates, maintained inappropriate relationships with subordinates, and participated in an inappropriate quid pro quo scheme with a contract company. It's a lot to get done in just a few weeks. The OIG found that the executive, and we still don't know who it is, engaged in improper hiring practices when, on 7 separate occasions, the executive disregarded merit system principles to hire close friends and associates as DOJ employees or DOJ contract personnel over applicants with superior qualifications for the positions. The OIG also found that the executive initiated and approved the promotion of a friend before the individual was eligible for promotion, nominated a friend for a monetary award without sufficient justification, and promoted a friend who lacked qualifications for the position. The OIG further found that the executive disclosed to friends and acquaintances non-public information about job opportunities on a pending DOJ contract and advocated for increasing contractors' salaries in support of friends. The OIG found that this conduct violated federal statutes, federal regulations, and DOJ policy. In addition, the OIG found that the executive maintained an inappropriate personal relationship with a subordinate and solicited and accepted gifts and donations from subordinates in violation of federal statutes and regulations and DOJ policy. The OIG investigation further concluded that the executive engaged in an inappropriate scheme with a DOJ contractor in which the executive sought employment and training from the contractor for personal friends in exchange for the executive actively participating in the creation and awarding of a purchase agreement of substantial monetary value to the contractor in violation of federal statutes and regulations. Lastly, the OIG found that the executive lacked candor, can't believe it, and provided false statements to the OIG in relation to the executive's conduct in the above described matters in violation of federal statute and regulation. Prosecution of the executive was declined. Interestingly enough, the OIG has completed its investigation and provided this report to EOIR, the Immigration Review Office, for appropriate action. The OIG also referred to the U.S. Office of Special Counsel its findings that the executive retaliated against employees who refused to hire the executive's friends. That is some serious list of charges against I don't know who, but I guess maybe if it goes to the Office of Special Counsel, I assume that's Mueller, and do we have any others hanging around that I don't know about? But I've seen nothing written about it, although I assume that Ryan Riley eventually got to it. But, man, that's like every criminal activity you worry about a political appointee engaging in. And it's June 7th. This came out June 6th. We're, less than 150 days into the administration for Trump. This guy couldn't have been on the job for much more than 140 of those days, I would assume. and he's broken every law there is. Amazing, top to bottom.
Are you surprised?
I'm surprised that he got so much in there so quickly, but it only because in order to do it in the amount of time they've had, you had to have arrived on day one with that as your agenda. You don't, there wasn't time for him to casually come to realize the power that he had, or could be a corrupt she. We don't know, but chances are in the Trump administration it's not. But you never know for sure.
Yeah.
But you really, you have to hit the ground running to get this much corruption
to get that
done.
much accomplished that quickly.
Yeah. Congratulations. Now that's running government like a business. I'll tell you, he knew exactly where to steal the money. Fantastic job. I wonder whether Ryan Riley has tweeted anything lately with his write-up about it, so I can send you all the tweet. But
yes,
man, that's a story.
So far I'm just seeing talk about Christopher Wray.
Yes, which we can do too. We have not had much discussion about him. Are you learning much about his background, or is that for later in the morning? Or
well, I'm not working on that story,
okay.
But Chris Christie's Bridgegate guy.
Yes,
and also, let's see, we were talking about it earlier this morning in Slack. Barb had found good stuff. The company said it had tapped George Sorial, Trump Organization executive, to be chief compliance counsel, and Bobby Birchfield, a Washington-based corporate lawyer, to serve as outside ethics advisor. Birchfield and Wray work at the same law firm.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I also I did see somebody hint that the law firm has a lot of Russian clients as well.
Right. The law firm represents Russia's national oil company, Rosneft.
Yes. And that one, of course, the one that was alleged in the Steele dossier to be putting up 19% of its shares possibly to like Carter Page to broker the end of sanctions was the rumor. That's,
that Rosneft.
Yeah, those guys. And there's others, but yeah. Although, like with hiring, there's an old strategy, especially in smaller towns, in hiring divorce lawyers, where they tell the first mover in divorce proceedings to just hire one lawyer, but meet with every lawyer in town about your divorce with no intention of hiring them, and that way they're all conflicted out of representing your spouse, and they have to go hunting for a lawyer elsewhere. I wonder whether Russia just, distributes its business around the biggest firms, and everyone will be conflicted in that way. I'm not sure, but Rosneft, that's really an exceptionally bright red flag. But
yes, indeed,
this guy may have had nothing to do with it, for all we know. But, that's a big story there. We still have to find out more about Wray and what he's really like. It seems to be very little in the way of objection to his qualifications, in that he's got government legal experience, and ordinarily you might think he might make a good fit for it, even if he may be a little bit more of a partisan than you would like. But also, this is a special situation. You got a president under investigation for a number of things, including firing the last FBI director because he was investigating him. It's going to be very tough to give anybody legal help.
It seems Chris Christie's guy would be who you would turn to.
Yeah, they did a great job for him. He's not in jail and everybody else is.
It makes you wonder if Chris Christie's star might be rising again with Trump.
Well, he got a lot of sort of backhanded good press in the last couple of weeks that said, had he remained in charge of the transition, some of this ridiculousness might not have happened. But I have a hard time believing that Donald Trump doesn't get exactly what he wants out of the people he allows to run things.
Yeah, I don't think that anybody has ever controlled.
Yeah. And, of course, the other, I guess the first rash of stories about Christie in connection with serving in a Trump administration was how low he had sunk in subjecting himself, to the indignities of working for Trump and being his McDonald's errand boy. So, I guess stars rise and fall, and that's really been the big story of the White House all along. I mean, the rise and fall of Kushner vis-a-vis Bannon, and now the resurgence of Bannon, and now where is Jared Kushner?
Did you see Trump's joke?
Yes,
quote unquote yesterday.
Right? Yeah.
Jared's more famous than him now, or something. The same thing that he'd said word for word about Comey.
Exactly. And then I saw Maggie Haberman this morning tweeting, I think, the New York Post, taking note of that and saying, here's something that was overlooked in yesterday's news. I'm like, what? Overlooked? There was nothing but that for an hour in my timeline.
On Twitter, yeah.
Oh, my God. I don't know where you were. I mean, I missed 10 things on
Not
Twitter,
on Twitter,
too,
apparently.
Either that or in a New York Times bubble, I guess. But wow. Okay, so thank you, New York Post, for waking up the New York Times, I guess.
I guess.
I don't know. It was hard to believe. But, Kushner now disappeared. And I was sure that stupid arms deal was fake from the beginning, although I thought so for different reasons. But now it turns out to be true. And but no reporters that I've seen so far able to nail down the basic question of, okay, did he call Lockheed Martin or did he not? Is that also fake? No word on that one. And nowhere to find him. And it's not even Friday. Okay. Well, Joan, have I lost your audio there? I believe I have. Oh, well, as it happens, the timing is good, except we are deprived of the opportunity to hear you as we say thank you for helping us close out the show today. It is time to do that. Joan McCarter, our senior political writer. Yes, here we are back, so we can thank you in person. Hi, Joan. Now I still can't hear you. Maybe something has come unplugged at your end, but we must be having some troubles. But so long as I'm not, if we're still broadcasting, let me say it far and wide, from here to Rochester to, Hawaii and around the world. Thank you very much, Joan, for giving us your time today. Yes, it is time to wrap up. We can catch all of what we were talking about, of course, on the front page of Daily Kos throughout the day, both from Joan and our other staff of stellar writers. I appreciate hearing from you. We'll be catching up with you next Wednesday as well, as always, here on Kagro in the Morning. And as always, right after Kagro in the Morning, the after show coming up next, right here on Netroots Radio. Here's what's on tap for the day. A musician from the Missouri Symphony Orchestra injures her hand when a United Airlines supervisor wrestles away her rare and expensive antique violin. Oh, God, don't hurt the violin. Cliven Bundy, remember him? His bodyguard pleads guilty to a federal weapons charge. And Barack Obama discusses leadership with Justin Trudeau at a gourmet fish house in Montreal, Canada. And on the last half, a visit with Angela Marks, a.k.a. Angie in Washington State, for a political and world news roundup. As always, all of that coming up next on Netroots Radio right here.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Thank you very much for listening. We'll catch up on more news tomorrow and throughout the week. Before we close things out, one more visit with Greg Dworkin. And, interesting story out of England, out of the London attacks. How about the Millwall football fan who took on the terrorists with his bare hands, screaming, F you, I'm Millwall. Great story.